Så vi är inne på C-avdelningen här och vi fortsätter med tankens proprioception. Jag hoppas att det hörs någorlunda ordentligt här. Jag ska föra videon något närmare mig själv här. Här sitter jag ju rätt bra, kan man ju långt säga. Och jag har ett exempel här. Det här med proprioception i kroppen är något som är inbyggt. Och för att förstå det så kan vi ta ett exempel från den kände författaren, läkaren och oerhört uppskattade vetenskapsmannen Oliver Sacks. Och det här var en kvinna som hade tappat proprioceptionen och vaknade upp saknandes den. Och vad du inte kan vara förutan, det är proprioception. Hon kunde inte ens sitta upp. Och hon var totalt oförmögen att göra någonting överhuvudtaget. Men till slut så lärde hon sig att ersätta proprioception med syn. Så genom att titta väldigt noggrant så var hon till slut förmögen att kunna ta sig runt. Det var också ett fall rapporterat från Oliver Sacks. Jag kan för övrigt rekommendera hans böcker. Det är mycket intressanta exempel där som sätter våra normala bilder på vad som är verklighet och upplevelse ur spel lite grann. Det var en kvinna som vaknade mitt i natten med en stroke. Och när ljuset tändes i rummet så slog hon sig själv. Och sen så slutade hon. Och vad som hade hänt det var att hennes proprioceptiva nerver, känselnerverna, hade blivit förstörda. Men hennes motornerver, alltså de som styr rörelse, var fortfarande i full funktion. Och hon rörde sin hand. Men hon visste inte att hon rörde den. Och hon blev slagen på huvudet och antagandet från hjärnan det var att någon annan slog henne. Och därmed slog hon tillbaka. Och ju hårdare hon blev slagen, ju mer slog hon tillbaka. Och så märkligt kan det vara när proprioceptionen sätts ur spel. Och det hela återfördes någorlunda till verkligheten det ögonblick som ljuset tändes i rummet. Och hon kunde se vad som hände. Så man skulle kunna säga att det finns två saker här. Dels att kroppen har en inbyggd proprioception. Och för det andra, även om det inte fungerar så kan det hyfsat ersättas utav de andra sinnena. Det är en möjlighet i alla fall. Och även om tanken inte verkar ha en proprioception. Vi gör saker och alla typer av saker sker. Känslor uppträder. Och vi ser inte att tänkandet alltid ligger innan våra reaktioner. Alltid. Det finns inga reaktioner utan tänkande. Och så här fungerar det. Nationer byggs, hela samhällen byggs upp, oändliga konsekvenser skapas. Och nästa tanke kommer att anta att de här var abstrakta. Eller så uttagna så som de vore oberoende. Men den typen av slutledning, abstraktion, är inte helt korrekt. Så därmed så görs en ny analys av det hela och man sluter säcken. Och det är ju det här som är problemet med den klassiska fysiken. Den är självbekräftande, men vi har också pratat om vänster hjärnhalva. Och här visar Bohm att just på grund av att tanken inte har någon proprioception, har ingenting för att känna av tanken. Tankens kraft, dess riktadhet och framförallt hur stark är den? Det är någonting som är okänt för oss. Vi kan tänka er själva, i de här exemplen så visades vad som händer med en enda person som tappar proprioceptionen i kroppen. Men vi har ingen proprioception alls i tanken. Så vi märker inte vilka tankar som ger våra handlingar egentligen. Men skulle vi ha en proprioception så skulle vi kunna styra tankarna. Vi skulle inte behöva vänta på att de dyker upp och vara mer eller mindre hjälplösa offer för dem. Utan vi skulle kunna ingå i ett samspel med dem, leda dem, precis som vi leder kroppen normalvis. Och en fråga naturligtvis som kan dyka upp i det här sammanhanget är varför inte tanken är proprioceptiv redan. Den är ju nämligen en del utav kroppens processer. Man skulle kunna säga att den är en mycket subtil mängd reflexer. Det är inte en helt orimlig tanke. Och den här subtila mängden reflexer skulle kunna bli mer avancerat, skulle kunna bli reflekterande. Så en tanke som Bohm lägger fram, det är att om vi är mer uppmärksamma och vi blir medvetna om tanken utvecklande, alltså enfolding and infolding, you will be better in the end of realizing where thought is going. But do go about slowly with this process. It won't lend itself to force. It's not something that's been done before, so you need to be very patient and careful when going about these things. But do now and then pay attention how the movement of thought, the thinking direction is going. And do note the qualities in thinking. It's really weird that we all are aware to some or certain degree of the body strength. I'm completely aware now that I'm a bit tired after sleeping sitting up for a long time. That affects the body, makes it a bit more unmovable, tough, hard, clumsy.
Where is the can you tell me just where the stuff there? The stuff is the death stuff. Where is the stuff desk there?
And what will happen is that you gradually find your way to see the thought. And I think a good start here, or a good indication of the start, is I notice first time I thought I was thinking about the thinking processes, it wasn't that. It was just a thinking thought in the lead. But oddly enough, that thought maybe the fourth or the fifth time I had it, it was a thought that was actually observing the thinking process. So what you could do is just add another thought, and you see that thought to be an observing thought. And what happened to me might happen to you. And to make it a bit clearer, you can say that what Alexander asked people to do by his directions is to trust them and see that they start to work, and that takes a time, but it needs a bit of trust. And maybe it's the same thing here, the same way to go about, but just be careful, because thought is a difficult thing. It won't lend itself to your demands. Not like the body. I can decide 5 o'clock every other day I will go to the gym and train 45 minutes on the treadmill or something like that. I can force the body to do that. I can't force thinking process in the same way. And especially in this case where you'll have to invent something that never existed before. But what does help is to understand enfoldment and unfoldment, because in this process you can get reflective. One thinking that Bohm adds here is that it could possibly be that among children this would be easier. And as you reasonably can say that all we think about the world is against this, usually. And I think part and parcel of this is the enormous conditioning we're having. We're conditioned to think that we can never control our thought process. That's something completely outside of our powers. But the good thing that David Bohm has promised us is that it's actually possible. You can hone in on the right direction, and in the end you will develop thoughts that are actually reflective and not in the chain of thinking, and not just pouring up from the well of the body, but they are being reflective. And after a while you'll feel those thoughts are very, very different, and all of a sudden you'll be able to do loads of things. For instance, one thing is you won't engage in decision making when the thinking process is on a low level, which is one of the most important things to understand, because it goes up and down, and the difference in the power of thinking process is so different from different periods during the day, during the week, during the month, but especially during the day, and make important decisions when you're at a low level instead of on a peak. That's really, really dangerous. And if especially you're so out of yourself, you don't even recognize your own thinking process when you're completely lost. If you have one of those symptoms, ADHD, something like that, or DDC, or whatever it's called, these people have lost the control of their thinking process. They can't even notice them. They are completely victimized for thinking, and it's a bit similar that you're being victimized to some drug or food product. You can't resist. Somebody puts a steak in front of you, you just start eating. You can't recognize whether you want it or not, because you are also conditioned. No wonder Skinner was so successful in his description of human beings, because most of us are conditioned to a certain degree, which has long stopped to be reflective. I think that's a thing of the past. But there is another factor at play here, and that is an attitude of learning. Proprioception is dependent on what you see as learning. Or being aware of the impulse to move and the result reflected back at the same time without having to think about it. In proprioception, you're not aware of a separate observer who's observing. The awareness is there without thinking. There's a self who's observing. And this is this underlying hollow movement Bohm is pinpointing here. That is what one could say consciousness as such. This reflective process that notes, sees, directs, fills things with intention and lead the way. What will happen when you develop proprioception is that you will be able to step out of your own reactions, simple reactions, the Skinnerian directly conditioned thinking process. Somebody says something to you, what you usually do is you react directly, either positive, negative, or something in between, or whatever it can be. But you think the causal effect or whatever is outside your own sphere of influence. But that's not the case at all, because when you get more into implicit, explicit, you'll understand that every action, every sensation, every emotion needs to start with a thought. So even if you have something explicit after the thought, something that's visible, an angry face, a reaction, something you do with your voice, you raise your voice, you start to cuss, or whatever it might be, that reaction is always preceded by a thinking, a thought. And that thought you can change. You can change your, so to speak, your reactions. At least you can change the implicit meaning. Maybe another way of expressing the same thing. Maybe it makes more sense. I don't know. But it's firstly when you start to do this, you can reach an harmonious order between the emotional and the intellectual levels of the brain, of your being. Without taking this step and being proprioceptive, I don't think that's even vaguely possible, because you need a directing intention. You need to be able to observe your own thinking processes to be able to change them. But without changing your thinking processes, you will remain the same. There will never ever be a change if you don't start in that corner of well, the word itself, proprioception, is used in biology and medicine, and it means essentially the same as self-perception or self-awareness. And it could be called feedback as well. In a psychological sense, proprioception amounts to a kind of awakening of awareness to itself. You become aware that you are aware. And proprioception means that awareness now also considers own operations as something to be taken into account, which is quite a tremendous step to take. Apparently there are not many people who have an awareness that includes awareness as being something to be aware of. And here you can hear, it's very clear that it's an unfoldment and an unfoldment going on here. I had to admit, before when I read those things, especially when you go into neurology psychology or Samkhya, you note that I get the feeling it's on different levels. And that didn't make a complete sense to me. It wasn't a picture that worked really. It didn't further my understanding of it. I needed something else. But I'd say with this implicit explicit that it's implied in the former thing that becomes the latter. That makes a lot more sense, and that's a working picture or image of the whole process. There's a higher level of reality to it. And the reason that proprioception is so important is because it enables an awareness to see the effect that facts, what you think about the world, have on emotions, and vice versa. In a way, it senses the movement or activities of the thoughts and the emotions. So it puts everything into motion. What we perceive to be facts, they could actually be caused by emotions, and vice versa. And there we also see the tremendous importance that you have the facts that fit the emotions you want to get a harmonious balance between unfolding and unfolding. We are incredibly sloppy when it comes to facts. We don't see them for what they are, what they cause, their role in our movements, our little holy movement or the big holy movement. And we're really clumsy with sort of facts we take in and say, I'm going to use these facts. Apparently, these days, it's even gone so bad, it's enough, it's true. But then you take it in. That's such a horrible conclusion, there's not even words for it. There is a gazillion facts, and only a micro percentage of those will do you any good. And being taken in everything is like going to into the nature and eat everything that you come upon or something. I think that's the worst conclusion a human being ever can do. Take all the facts around you, or the one you happen to stumble across, even worse. And I think that most people do. There's a huge debate now in my own country, Sweden, where something is a fact or not. What a nonsensical question. What you should take in are the facts that you need for your system. And being sloppy with facts you take in is like being sloppy with what you eat in the forest or in a farmyard. Say, I might as well eat a stone, it's real, it's true. It's part of reality, I might as well eat it. These are horrible conclusions. We need no facts. The best way to destroy a country is overwhelm it by facts. Listen to the civil defense. There's no use using lies. What you need is overwhelm people with information, and that will literally completely confuse them and lead to their own death. Lies can't do that. So we need to be very careful which facts we take in. They should have a purpose in your own system, and I think that's a very good start of having a proprioception of thinking. And even unimportant facts could be quite detrimental. Maybe not because of their significance emotionally, but just the sheer amount of them. Because they lead to confusion. It's like you threw in a game of Trivial Pursuit into your own head. You cannot make decisions when you're overwhelmed with facts. And you should never ever choose something just because it's true. Don't do that, please. Look at first, will this serve a purpose for me? Because you are in a system of unfoldment and unfoldment. And there's so many things that can be made explicit from something that's implicit. But it doesn't mean that all those explicit things, they're all true, all coming from the implicit. But it doesn't mean you should use whichever one. This is like giving up direction completely. So, and this is something I came to understand even better now when implicit, explicit. I see the role it takes. And of course, explicit is part of reality, but you need to understand how explicit works. This doesn't say that explicit is bad, but you need to understand how it works. I think that's the conclusion. This is vaguely similar to someone I know who stated that you can take a pill, well, I think it was some sort of oil, and your memory will improve. What? What on earth? You need to train your memory. You need to train it every day of your life. You need to put a lot of time in that training. And memory never will improve by taking some oil, some pill or something else, making exercises, standing on your head. Never. Memory needs to be trained more than any body part. You are training yourself, you're training your intelligence, you're training your cognition. Without that training, you are lost, completely lost. And maybe that's one of the implicit reasons for taking away utantil-lärning, because these days the only one who's doing utantil-lärning are the politicians. They need to do that. They need to rehearse long speeches. They need to have long arguments into the head. They need to get into subjects very quick, therefore they need a very good memory. And that memory, trust me, they are training constantly. But they don't want you to train your memory, because they prefer you to be a subject instead of something that takes charge. You need to be subject to the decisions the ones who are actually training the memory are doing, because training your memory will make you autonomous, will make you self-ruling. And Adolf von Bohm here, he could actually in the end lead you to self-awareness, proprioception of your thinking process. And if you're in charge of your thinking process, you'll be in charge of everything. There will be no stopping you. And that's second aspect that David Bohm takes up, is that if we had proprioception, the brain would recognize the effect of what it has done. Intelligence could operate, and as a result it could now entertain the idea of passion. The notion of passion is explained in detail as something that builds up and becomes force. And I think one of the reasons we can't have passion today is because we need to be automatically working, and a passionate thinking would lead us astray. Because of this working automatic thinking, passion doesn't serve a purpose, or could lead you astray. But I think we need passion. We need to believe firmly in something, and that would be possible if you can control it. A controlled passion is a good passion. So you see also how we develop in society. If we don't have control of ourselves, the sheer mass of people we have around us will make that it's very hard to develop as an autonomous person. You won't be lord in your own house, you won't be owner of the house, but just because of practical circumstances, we do develop in a symbiosis in society together with others. That part and parcel of who we are. And that's what Heidegger meant with Das Man. It didn't mean anything negative, it just meant that that's a part of us that we need to acknowledge. But we preferably, if we leave that part to be a living thing in ourselves and control it, at least to some extent, it will no longer serve as an obstacle. It will be something very helpful, because it is and will remain a part of ourselves. I think that's quite enough for the ABC of these short-term paths. I thank you very much. Bye bye.